Chapter 1. I woke to the sound of my husband's scream ripping through the open balcony doors. That scream, I knew it from somewhere deep and broken inside me. I had heard it once before, in another life that still clawed at my memory. It was the worst afternoon I had ever survived, 6 floors below our Cleveland apartment. People were already gathering in the courtyard, their voices blurring into one stunned hum. Daniel was on his knees beside our 14-year-old daughter. His hands hovering uselessly over her body because someone kept shouting at him not to move her. Emily lay on the concrete next to a crushed hedge, blood streaking one side of her face. Her left leg bent at an angle that made my stomach turn. No leg should ever bend like that. The canvas awning over the lobby entrance had torn under her weight, and that thin strip of fabric was the only reason she was still breathing. She had jumped again. My fingers gripped the balcony railing until the metal bit into my palms, hard enough to leave marks. Then I smiled, not because my daughter was hurt, not because I wanted a child dead. I smiled because the scene below proved that I had been given exactly what I begged for during the final, suffocating hours of my first life. Another chance. In that first life, I had run downstairs barefoot, shoving through the crowd and ignoring the paramedics. I had tried to lift Emily with my own hands, desperate and foolish. I rode in the ambulance with her blood soaking into my blouse, praying so hard that words failed me entirely. She survived a fractured femur, 3 broken ribs, 2 damaged vertebrae, and a head injury that kept us all holding our breath. I sat beside her hospital bed for 3 straight days without sleeping, barely drinking water. When she finally opened her eyes, I bent over her and sobbed like the world had been handed back to me. Her first words cut deeper than any fall. "Mom, can you stop controlling me for once?" I told myself it was the pain talking, that she didn't mean it. The truth was uglier than I could have imagined. Minutes before she climbed onto that balcony railing, her boyfriend, Jason Cole, had sent her a message, asterisk, "If you really love me, prove it. Do something nobody else's girlfriend would dare to do?" Asterisk. Emily proved it with her body, and I blamed myself for everything. I decided I had been too strict, too busy, too demanding during the year she spent recovering. So I gave her everything she asked for: a new phone after the police kept her old one as evidence, a gaming computer, takeout whenever she hated Daniel's cooking, private rehab appointments that she skipped whenever Jason wanted to see her. If I objected to Jason, Emily stopped eating. If Daniel set a rule, she threatened to hurt herself again. Every time our daughter raised that weapon, we surrendered completely. At 18, she left home with Jason, announcing she would never touch another dollar of my dirty business money. At 22, she came back begging for wedding funds. At 28, she returned for investment money because she and Jason had discovered a can't-fail business opportunity which failed before they even signed the lease. They kept the money anyway. At 34, Emily arrived with tears streaming down her face, asking Daniel and me to move into the house she shared with Jason. She said we were getting older, that she finally understood family, that she wanted to care for us. We believed her, because parents can spend decades mistaking hunger for love when the hungry person calls them mom and dad. Emily cooked dinner our first night there, poured wine, and Jason toasted to a fresh start. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, so happy that our daughter had finally come home. The weakness started weeks later, my hands shaking, Daniel's feet going numb, weight loss, pale skin. Emily took us to appointments, answered questions for us, and reminded every doctor that we were old and forgetful. The specialist who saved my life only met me because Emily was late, and I went in without her. She listened when I spoke, ordered tests, and discovered what Emily had repeatedly dismissed as unnecessary heavy metal contamination. Long-term exposure, not an accident. Police found packets of poison in Jason's locked desk drawer, purchase records on Emily's computer, and a handwritten calendar hidden beneath the guest room mattress. Asterisk, increase the dose after winter. Mother's trust pays out automatically after death. 2 more years, maybe less. Asterisk. My daughter hadn't invited us into her home to care for us, she had invited us to kill us slowly and collect everything I had built. In court, Emily knelt before me, crying, "Mom, I made a mistake. Please tell them I would never hurt you." Her eyes looked exactly as they had when she was 14, lying in that hospital bed empty. She and Jason were convicted. Daniel died 4 years later from complications linked to the poisoning. Emily died in prison before she turned 50, and Jason died there too. I lived another 20 years, but people called that survival. It never felt like survival to me. It felt like a long hallway with no doors, just endless walls. Near the end, I kept replaying that afternoon Emily jumped, asking myself, What if I had saved her life without surrendering mine? What if love didn't mean financing every threat and excusing every betrayal? Then I woke to Daniel screaming beneath the balcony, the courtyard coming back into focus. An emergency operator gave instructions through someone's phone, sirens approaching from the next block. Daniel looked up toward our apartment, searching for me. In my first life, that look had pulled me downstairs. This time, I lifted one hand so he knew I was conscious, then pointed toward the building entrance where paramedics were arriving. Daniel understood, backed away, and let trained people work. I stepped inside and found Emily's phone lying on the rug beside the balcony door, screen cracked but still lit. Jason's message waited at the top, if you love me, jump. I want to know I matter more than your mother, beneath it, Emily had typed, watch me. I didn't delete the message or throw the phone against the wall. I photographed the screen with my own phone, including the date and contact info, then put Emily's device in a paper bag and called the police. My daughter had made her choice. This time, I would make mine. Chapter 2. By the time I reached St. Catherine's Hospital, Emily was already in surgery. Daniel sat in the family waiting area with blood dried across both knees of his jeans, his face gray with exhaustion. When he saw me, he stood so fast that his chair scraped backward. Claire, I crossed the room and held him, feeling him shake against me. In my first life, I had been the one falling apart while Daniel tried to hold us both together. I had never noticed how terrified he was. I had treated his grief as background noise because mine seemed louder. She's alive, I said. The trauma surgeon said she reached the OR with stable blood pressure. Daniel pulled back, his eyes wild. Why would she do that? I could have told him everything about the other lifetime, the poison, the boy who ordered this performance. But Daniel wouldn't have believed me, and the truth would have tied him to a future that hadn't happened yet. So I gave him the truth that belonged to this life. I showed him the photographs on my phone. His expression shifted as he read Jason's message. Horror became disbelief, and disbelief hardened into anger. He told her to jump, and she agreed. He's 16. What kind of boy writes something like that? I answered quietly, one who needs adults to stop calling cruelty a teenage misunderstanding. A Cleveland police detective named Maria Torres met us in a consultation room. I handed her Emily's phone in the paper bag and explained exactly where I had found it. She told us officers had already spoken with witnesses and photographed the balcony and courtyard. Because Emily was a minor and the message appeared connected to self-harm, the department would involve juvenile investigators and a school threat assessment team. I asked for a property receipt for the phone, and Daniel stared at me. How are you thinking about receipts right now? Because in my first life, Jason had denied sending the message, Emily had supported his lie, and the conversation had vanished from her phone. I had been too busy blaming myself to preserve anything, because grief doesn't keep records, people do. Detective Torres studied me for a moment, then nodded. The surgeon came out after several hours with good but cautious news. Emily had made it through. The fall shattered her left femur and injured 2 vertebrae, but her spinal cord wasn't severed. She might walk again with proper rehab. Her head injury required observation, and the doctor warned recovery would be slow. Daniel covered his mouth with both hands, and I thanked the surgeon while asking practical questions: weight-bearing restrictions, inpatient care, rehab timeline, signs of neurological decline. The doctor answered each one, and when he left, Daniel stared at me like I was a stranger. You haven't cried. The words escaped before I could stop them. I cried for her for 34 years. Daniel frowned. What does that mean? I took his hands and spoke from my gut. It means I spent 14 years being afraid that one wrong rule would make Emily stop loving us. Today proved that surrendering every boundary didn't keep her safe. I won't do it anymore. She's our daughter. Yes, that means we pay for her treatment, make sure she has professional help, and give her a safe home. It does not mean we reward what she did or pretend Jason had nothing to do with it. Daniel looked toward the intensive care doors. She could have died. I knew more clearly than anyone. But if she uses that fact to control us for the rest of our lives, then some part of us will die every single day instead. Daniel didn't answer. That night, he stayed at the hospital while I went home, showered, changed the sheets in Emily's room, and opened the locked cabinet in my study. Inside were our estate documents, business records, insurance policies, and the storage agreement from the fertility clinic we had used years earlier. Daniel and I had needed treatment to conceive Emily. 3 embryos were created. 1 became our daughter. 1 failed to implant, and 1 remained frozen because I had suffered a uterine rupture during Emily's delivery and could never safely carry another pregnancy. Every year I paid the storage fee, and every year Daniel asked whether we should let that embryo go. Every year I said, not yet, because Emily might feel replaced if we had another child. I had built our entire family around the possible reaction of one girl. I placed the storage agreement on top of the file, then called our attorney and scheduled a meeting. Chapter 3. Emily woke 2 days later, and Daniel called me from the hospital, crying with relief. I waited until the neurologist finished examining her before I went in. Emily looked smaller beneath the white sheets. Bruises darkening her cheek and jaw, metal hardware holding her repaired leg in place. Her eyes shifted toward me, then away. In my first life, I had rushed to the bed and covered her face with kisses. This time, I remained by the door. She waited, confused, when I didn't move. "Mom?" I kept my voice steady. "I heard you're stable." Her mouth tightened. "That's all you have to say?" Daniel stood on the other side of the bed, exhausted and hopeful, wanting this to become the reunion we had once imagined. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "It hurts," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I won't talk to Jason again, I swear. Just don't be mad." The performance was perfect because she had practiced it in another lifetime. I walked closer but didn't touch her. "Pain is not punishment, Emily. It is the consequence of falling 6 stories. The doctors will treat it, and we will make sure you receive everything medically necessary." Relief flickered across her face until I continued, "But your phone is with the police. The school knows what happened, and Jason's messages have been preserved. You will complete the psychiatric evaluation and follow every rehabilitation order. You will not contact him while the no-contact directive is in place." Her tears stopped. "You gave them my phone." "Yes. You had no right. I am 14. You used that phone to arrange an act that nearly killed you. I had both the right and the responsibility." Jason was joking. "Were you joking when you climbed over the railing?" She turned to Daniel. "Dad, tell her." Daniel flinched. In the old life, that would have been enough. He would have asked me to wait until Emily recovered, and I would have agreed because peace always mattered more to us than truth. But Daniel looked at the casts, the monitors, the bruises, then at our daughter. "Your mother is right." Emily stared at him. "You both hate me." "No," Daniel said softly. "We love you enough to stop helping you destroy yourself." Emily turned her face toward the wall. "Get out." Daniel's shoulders folded inward, but I took his hand. "We'll come back when the doctors ask us to." The moment the door closed, Daniel leaned against the hallway wall. That felt cruel. It felt unfamiliar, I said. Cruel would be letting her believe a threat is more powerful than every person around her. Cruel would be teaching her that pain erases responsibility. Daniel rubbed both hands over his face. "I don't know how you became so certain overnight." I knew. I had watched uncertainty poison us one compromise at a time. The hospital required Emily to meet with a child psychiatrist before discharge. She refused the first interview, but when the psychiatrist explained that refusal would delay transfer to physical rehab, she participated. Jason's parents hired an attorney and claimed their son's account had been hacked, but Detective Torres showed them provider records and building camera footage of Jason waiting across the street while Emily climbed onto the railing. Jason had filmed the fall from behind a parked car, a detail never uncovered in my first life. He hadn't merely dared her, he had come to watch. The video had been deleted from his phone, but a cloud copy remained. The juvenile court didn't treat him as a murderer because Emily had made the final act herself. But it imposed supervised counseling, community service, and a strict no-contact order. The school moved him to an alternative program while its own investigation continued. Emily blamed me for every consequence. She didn't blame Jason for pressing record. When I visited a week later, she asked whether I could convince the prosecutor to drop everything. "No." "Then don't come back." "All right." She jerked her head toward me, expecting bargaining, but I just set a clean sweatshirt on the chair, confirmed her next surgery with the nurse, and left. For the next 10 weeks, I went to the hospital twice while Daniel went every day. At first, I worried he would repeat my old mistakes, then I understood the difference. Daniel brought clothes, attended care conferences, and learned how to help with transfers. He didn't sneak Emily a phone, contact Jason, or promise nothing would change. He came home tired, ate in silence, and slept with one hand wrapped around mine. Our daughter was healing. Our marriage was finally waking up. Chapter 4. Emily came home in a wheelchair 3 months after the fall. We installed a temporary ramp, moved a bed into the den, and arranged for a home health aide each morning and a physical therapist 4 times a week. Daniel organized medication, meals, bathing equipment, and follow-up appointments. I paid every bill. That was care. Servitude began when Emily decided every discomfort was Daniel's fault. The water is too hot. Daniel replaced it. This chicken is dry. Daniel made soup. My charger is in my room. Daniel went upstairs. Emily never asked whether her father had slept or thanked him for anything. She spent her days playing games on a tablet, laughing with online friends, and complaining whenever rehab interrupted her fun. I watched for 2 weeks, then changed the rules. The aide would handle personal care, meals would be served at set times. Emily could choose from what was available or make a sandwich once she could safely stand. Entertainment access would depend on completing school assignments, therapy, and counseling. She exploded, "You can't punish me for being disabled. I'm not." These are the same expectations you had before the injury, adjusted for what your doctors say you can do. Dad doesn't care. Daniel looked down at his hands, and I said, "Your father cares so much that he is disappearing inside your demands. That stops today." The real break came over a bowl of oatmeal. Daniel had cooked it with cinnamon because Emily had requested cinnamon the night before. She took one bite, shoved the bowl off the tray, and hot oatmeal splashed across Daniel's jeans and the back of his hand. "Brown sugar, not cinnamon. Are you stupid?" The room went silent. In my first life, I would have hurried to clean the floor, told Emily that pain made people say things they didn't mean, and asked Daniel to be patient. This time, I picked up the unbroken bowl, set it hard on the coffee table, and stepped between them. "You do not speak to my husband that way." Emily blinked. "He messed it up." "Then you say, 'No, thank you.' You do not throw food at the man who has washed you, lifted you, driven you, and slept in a chair beside your hospital bed. He's my dad. He's supposed to help me. He is your father, not your employee." Emily's face reddened. "You're choosing him over me." "I am choosing basic decency over your tantrum." I bent until we were eye level. "Listen carefully, the next time you throw food or insult him, the tablet is gone for a week. If you strike him, threaten him, or deliberately interfere with your treatment, your care team will document it, and we will request placement in an inpatient rehab program. You will still receive food, medicine, education, and treatment. You will not receive a private servant." Emily looked toward Daniel, expecting rescue. Daniel's burned hand was turning red, his eyes shone, but not from the oatmeal. "Your mother is right." Emily's mouth fell open. I led Daniel to the kitchen. Sink and ran cool water over his hand while Emily began crying loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. Neither of us went back that night. Daniel sat on the edge of our bed for a long time. "She never asked if I was burned." "I know," he said. "I keep thinking about when she was little. She used to bring me bandages if I cut myself shaving." I closed my laptop and sat beside him. "You took care of her for 3 months. Has she asked once whether you were tired?" He shook his head. "Has she thanked you without wanting something immediately afterward?" Another shake. His voice broke. "What happened to our little girl?" I could have said Jason happened, adolescence happened, we spoiled her, all partly true and dangerously comforting. She learned that love meant other people would absorb the cost of her choices. We taught her some of that. Daniel wiped his face. "Can we fix it? We can change what we do, we cannot make her want to change." He leaned against my shoulder. "We're going to be alone when we're old." In my first life, Daniel had asked the same question after Emily moved us into the house where she poisoned us. By then, it was too late to build anything except an escape. I reached into the nightstand and took out the fertility clinic agreement. Daniel stared at the familiar logo. "We still have one embryo," I said. "Claire, I am not suggesting another child as a nurse for our old age. I am not replacing Emily. Children are not insurance policies or spare parts for broken families." He ran his thumb over the paper. "Then why now?" "Because every year we asked what Emily would think, we never asked what we wanted." Daniel looked at me for a long time. "What do you want?" "I want to stop making fear the head of this family. I want to raise a child with love and limits. I want you and me to build a life that does not rise and fall with Emily's mood." "You can't carry again." "I know, the clinic works with licensed agencies and independent attorneys. We would need a gestational carrier, medical screening, counseling, and a court-approved parentage plan. It would take time. It might not work." Daniel's eyes filled again. "A son," he whispered. "The embryo was a boy." "Yes. He pressed the agreement to his chest. Do you really want to try? I do. Daniel looked toward the den where our daughter was still muttering about us, then back at me. So do I. For the first time since I had returned to this life, I cried, not for the daughter who had jumped, but for the husband I had almost lost while trying to catch her. Chapter 5. We didn't make the decision in secret and rush into a clinic the next morning that would have been another version of the same mistake, acting from fear and calling it love. Daniel and I spent 6 months in counseling, meeting with a reproductive endocrinologist, an independent family law attorney, a financial advisor, and 2 agencies that coordinated gestational surrogacy. The psychologist asked questions neither of us enjoyed. Were we trying to replace Emily? Would we resent a second child? If the embryo didn't survive, would we compare personalities? Could we accept that a son might grow into someone difficult, ordinary, or completely unlike the child we imagined? The last question stayed with me. In my first life, I had loved Emily less like a separate human being and more like proof that I was a good mother. Every time she failed, I paid to erase the failure. Every time she rejected me, I offered more. I had called that unconditional love, but much of it was terror and pride. A child doesn't owe us a personality, I told Daniel after one session. No, he said, but every child owes the people around them basic respect. We can teach that without demanding worship. That was the balance we had never found with Emily. The clinic confirmed that the remaining embryo was viable enough to attempt transfer, and the agency introduced us to Sarah and Mark Wilson, a married couple in California. Sarah had carried 2 children of her own and 1 successful surrogate pregnancy. She had her own attorney, health advocate, counselor, and insurance review. She didn't need us to save her. She didn't call the arrangement a miracle, she called it a serious medical commitment with clear boundaries. I liked her immediately. We agreed that any pregnancy decision involving Sarah's body belonged to Sarah within the medical and legal framework: communication, travel, lost wages, insurance, complications, and what would happen if the transfer failed all went into writing before medication began. It was the opposite of the home I had built around Emily, where nobody said what they needed and every promise changed after she cried. Meanwhile, Emily learned to walk again. The first time she crossed the therapy room with a walker, Daniel wept. I clapped and told Emily she had worked hard. She looked at me as if praise without a new gift was an insult. Can I have my phone back now? The police had returned it to us. Your counselor recommends limited access with parental controls. I'm not a baby. Then show adult judgment. She took the phone and immediately searched for Jason through a friend's account. The monitoring software recorded it. We removed the phone for another month. She screamed that she hated me, knocked over a lamp, and told Daniel that I had ruined our family. I photographed the damage, sent the incident report to her therapist, and applied the consequence we had explained in advance: no argument, no extra punishment, no surrender. Emily began to understand that the old doors no longer opened. She became quieter but not kinder. When she could manage the stairs, she returned to her bedroom, and Daniel no longer carried meals to her. Emily attended school remotely, completed enough work to advance, and performed exercises when the therapist stood over her. The moment supervision disappeared, so did her effort. Jason sent messages through classmates, each one saying some version of the same thing: your mother is the enemy. Wait until you're 18, then nobody can keep us apart. Emily printed one and hid it inside a math book. I found it while collecting school materials for a conference. I didn't confront her. I copied it, gave it to the school and Detective Torres, and returned the original exactly where it had been. Jason violated the no-contact order again 2 days later. This time, the juvenile court extended supervision and required his parents to install monitoring software. His father came to our house and accused me of trying to destroy his son's future. I stood on the front step and let the doorbell camera record every word. Your son filmed my daughter jumping from a 6th-floor balcony. His future is not my responsibility, his behavior is yours. Teenagers make mistakes. A mistake is missing a homework deadline. He arranged a spectacle and pressed record. Emily chose to jump. Yes, she did. I hold her responsible for that. You should try holding Jason responsible for his part. He threatened to sue. I gave him my attorney's card. He never filed. He did something cheaper. Jason's father sent an edited clip from the doorbell conversation to a local parenting page. The clip began after I mentioned the recording of Emily's fall and ended before I said Jason had come to watch her jump. In the shortened version, I appeared to be a wealthy mother threatening a frightened teenage boy with courts and lawyers. Comments multiplied. Strangers called me heartless. Someone found Lakeview Packaging's public office number and urged customers to boycott us. My managers wanted a statement. In my first life, I would have published Emily's medical history to defend myself, exposing my own child for approval from people who would forget us by the next week. Instead, our attorneys sent the unedited footage privately to the page administrator, along with a letter explaining that the matter involved sealed juvenile proceedings and minor medical privacy. The administrator removed the post and published a correction stating that the submitted clip had omitted material context. We said nothing else at Lakeview. I met with the staff and told them no employee had to answer questions about my family. Customers received one line: "A private juvenile medical matter is being handled by the proper authorities." The boycott disappeared before it began. Emily was furious that I had not fought publicly. "Everyone thinks Jason lied now." He did. His dad was protecting him by using part of a private conversation and inviting strangers into your medical history. Is that protection? She opened her mouth, then closed it for one brief moment. I saw doubt. Jason erased it during their next call. At home, Emily demanded to know why I had embarrassed Jason's family. They came to my house. I did not invite them. When I'm 18, I'm leaving. In my first life, that threat had kept me awake for nights. This time, I nodded. Then used the next 3 years to prepare. Learn to budget, keep your grades high enough for work or college, get your driver's license when your doctors clear you. Independence requires more than slamming a door. She searched my face for fear and found none. "You'll regret it." "I already have," I said, just not in the way she meant. Chapter 6. The embryo transfer succeeded. Sarah called us from San Diego after her blood test confirmed the pregnancy, and Daniel sat at the kitchen table with the phone between us. For several seconds, neither of us spoke, then Sarah laughed. "You two can breathe now. This is only the beginning, but today is good news." Daniel covered his eyes and cried. I held his free hand and stared at the faint scar across my wrist, a mark left by an intravenous line during the poisoning in my first life. The scar didn't exist in this body, of course, but I could still feel it whenever I remembered. "Today is good news," I repeated. "We told only the people who needed to know. Our attorneys, doctors, Sarah and Mark, my mother Margaret, and Daniel's older sister Rebecca. We did not tell Emily. Hiding a sibling forever would have been cruel, but protecting a fragile pregnancy from a girl who shared every family detail with the boy who had encouraged her suicide attempt was reasonable. Our therapist agreed that disclosure could wait until the pregnancy was medically established and Emily had shown enough stability to hear the news safely. She never reached that point. Emily was 16 when Jason's court supervision ended. Within a week, they were speaking again. She didn't bother to hide it well. She used library computers, borrowed phones, and met him near a bus stop after physical therapy. I knew because I had learned the difference between surveillance and attention. I didn't follow her or read every thought. I noticed unexplained transit charges, missed appointments, and the cologne on her jacket. When I asked directly, she lied. "I was with Noah." Noah's mother called Daniel because she hadn't seen you in a month. Her face hardened. "So what?" Jason apologized. "We love each other." Then you can make decisions about that relationship when you are legally an adult. Until then, he is not welcome in this home, in our vehicles, or at your medical appointments. You can't stop me from seeing him. I can control what I fund and what happens under my roof. She smiled with the cold confidence of a child who believes parents have no breaking point. "You won't cut me off. You care too much what people think." That sentence came directly from my first life. She had said it at 28 while asking for business money. Back then, I had written the check just to prove her wrong. Now, I smiled back. "Try me." Her private gaming subscription ended that afternoon, as did the allowance she used for unapproved trips. We paid for school, food, clothing, therapy, transportation to required activities, and reasonable social expenses discussed in advance, nothing more. She called me abusive online. I didn't reply. When a school counselor contacted us because several parents had seen her posts, I provided the written household budget, therapy records, and the counselor's own safety plan. The school found no neglect. The counselor did find that Jason had been drafting many of Emily's posts. Emily's attempt to shame us ended with another recommendation that she reduce contact with him. She learned nothing. Our family therapist asked her during the next session what she believed love required. Emily crossed her arms. "Loyalty. What does loyalty look like? You believe somebody even when other people don't. Do you believe them when evidence shows they lied? If you love them, you ask why they had to lie. The therapist turned to Daniel and me. And what do you believe love requires? Daniel answered before I could: safety, honesty, the freedom to say no without being punished. Emily laughed. That's mom talking. No, Daniel said. That is me finally talking. The room went still. Emily had spent years treating her father as soft material she could shape around any obstacle. Hearing Daniel claim a separate voice unsettled her more than my anger ever had. He turned you against me, Emily said. You keep asking me to choose between being your father and being her husband, Daniel replied. I refuse the choice. I am both. Emily walked out before the session ended. The therapist didn't chase her, neither did we. In the parking lot, Daniel leaned against our car and breathed as if he had run a mile. I should have said that years ago. You said it today. Was it enough? He thought about the question, then nodded. Enough to be true. Daniel learned plenty. For years he had panicked whenever Emily accused us of failing her. Now he asked one question, asterisk, is the accusation true? Asterisk, if the answer was no, he didn't perform guilt for an audience. Our marriage became lighter. We ate dinner without waiting for Emily to approve the menu, took weekend walks, and Daniel returned to the woodworking he had abandoned. After Emily's fall, I stopped canceling business trips whenever our daughter sulked. Lakeview Packaging grew from a regional company into a serious supplier for medical and food manufacturers. In my first life, Emily's emergencies had repeatedly pulled me away from negotiations. I had still made money, but every success came with chaos attached. This time, I built systems instead of making myself indispensable. I promoted 2 experienced managers, created an employee profit-sharing plan, and began discussing a future sale to the leadership team. Emily assumed the company would become hers. I never told her that. She simply believed everything I touched already belonged to her. During Sarah's 3rd trimester, Daniel's father needed hip surgery in San Diego. The timing gave us a simple explanation for Daniel's travel. He spent several weeks helping his father and attending appointments with Sarah when she invited him. I visited on business trips and stayed only as long as my schedule allowed. Emily barely noticed. Dad's still in California, she asked once, eyes fixed on a video. Yes. When's he coming back? Next week. Tell him my car needs gas. She didn't ask how her grandfather's surgery had gone, why Daniel sounded emotional after phone calls, or see the tiny knitted hat tucked inside my briefcase when I returned from San Diego. She saw only what served her. That blindness made secrecy easy, it also made the coming truth inevitable. Chapter 7. Our son was born on a clear morning in California. Sarah labored in a private room with Mark beside her, and Daniel and I waited where she had asked us to wait. This was her medical event, not our performance. When the nurse finally opened the door and told us we could come in, Daniel almost forgot how to walk. The baby rested against Sarah's chest, red-faced and furious at the world. Meet your son, Sarah said. My knees weakened. Daniel reached the bed first, looked at Sarah, waited for her nod, then touched one finger to the baby's curled fist. The baby closed his hand around Daniel's finger. He laughed and sobbed at the same time. I had thought rebirth was the most impossible thing I would ever experience. Then Lucas Bennett opened his eyes. We stayed in California through the required medical checks and parentage hearing. The judge confirmed Daniel and me as Lucas's legal parents under the pre-birth agreement and follow-up order. Sarah had independent representation throughout the process. Nothing depended on a whispered promise or a hidden envelope. When Lucas was ready to leave the hospital, Sarah held him once more. Give him boundaries. Everybody gives babies love. Boundaries are harder. We will, I said. It was the most important blessing anyone could have offered. For the next year, Lucas lived with my mother in a house outside San Diego while Daniel and I leased the neighboring cottage. He spent long stretches there under the explanation that his father needed continuing help. I divided my time between Ohio and California while preparing Lakeview for sale. It wasn't a conventional arrangement. It was exhausting, expensive, and sometimes lonely. It was also safe, lawful, and temporary. Most important, Lucas was never hidden from the people caring for him. He had grandparents, pediatricians, insurance, birth records, and parents who were present. He was hidden only from Emily and Jason until we could move permanently. The arrangement still carried a cost. I missed the morning Lucas rolled over for the first time because a factory audit kept me in Ohio. I missed a pediatric appointment after a snowstorm canceled my flight. Once I arrived in California and Lucas reached for my mother instead of me, the rejection lasted only seconds, but it cut anyway. I sat in the guest room that night and wondered whether I had built another family around absence. Daniel found me holding one of Lucas's sleepers. He knows you. He wanted Mom. Your mother gives him breakfast every morning, of course he wanted her. Attachment is not a competition. In my first life, I had treated every sign of Emily's independence as a threat. I had needed to be the person she chose first, even when that choice required me to weaken everyone else. Daniel sat beside me. We said this would be temporary. If it stops being temporary, we change the plan. That was another difference. Our choices could be examined, they were not sacred merely because we had made them. I rearranged my consulting schedule, promoted an additional plant manager, and spent longer stretches in California. Profit dipped for one quarter and recovered in the next. Lucas began reaching for both my mother and me. Nothing collapsed because I admitted a plan needed adjustment. In Cleveland, Emily recovered almost completely. She walked with a slight limp in cold weather. She got a part-time job at a grocery store and lasted 6 weeks before quitting because the manager wouldn't let Jason spend his entire shift near the registers. She told everyone she had been fired for discrimination and threatened to file a complaint. I said, write down the policy, the dates, and what was said. Why can't you just believe me? Belief is not evidence. She never filed. At 17, she announced that Jason's aunt would hire her at a car dealership after graduation. She said she didn't need college, trade school, or any advice from us. Make sure the offer is in writing, Daniel said. Emily laughed. Not everybody treats family like a contract. The aunt denied ever offering her a job. Emily blamed Daniel for manifesting failure. While she accused us of ruining her future, Lucas learned to crawl across my mother's living room rug. He had Daniel's brown eyes and my stubborn chin. He laughed whenever someone sneezed, hated peas, loved the sound of paper crinkling, and tried to eat every book we gave him. Daniel sent me videos when I was in Ohio. In one, Lucas held half a teething biscuit toward the camera and said something that sounded like Mama. I watched it in my locked office and cried until my assistant knocked to ask whether I was ill. I was not ill. For the first time, I was learning that love could be quiet. It didn't need a crisis to prove itself. When Lucas took his first steps, he fell and looked at Daniel in surprise. Daniel didn't rush to pull him upright. He held out his hands and said, "You can try again." Lucas pushed himself up. That small moment healed something in both of us. We had spent years picking Emily up before she even decided whether to stand. With Lucas, we would be close enough to catch real danger and wise enough not to steal the work of growing. Emily turned 18 3 months before Lucas's 3rd birthday. Jason arrived at our house in a dented red sedan and leaned on the horn. Our daughter came downstairs carrying 2 suitcases. The day she had threatened for years had finally arrived. Chapter 8. Daniel and I were in the living room when Emily placed her suitcases beside the front door. She waited for us to panic. I continued reading the sale agreement on my tablet. Daniel kept trimming green beans for dinner. Emily dragged one suitcase directly in front of the television. "I'm leaving." I looked up. "All right." Her jaw tightened. "I'm moving in with Jason. I don't want you interfering in my life anymore. You're 18, you can choose where you live. And I don't want your money ever." In my first life, I had begged her not to go, offered an apartment, a car, and tuition. I had stood in the doorway crying while Jason smiled from the curb. This time, I opened the folder on the coffee table. "Then we should be clear about what that means." I handed her a list. The sedan she drove was titled to Lakeview Packaging. The phone was on our family plan. The credit card was an authorized user card on my account. The laptop had been purchased by the company for school and remote work. Those items would remain. Her clothes, personal gifts, photographs, books, and the money in her checking account belonged to her. The education fund would stay available for accredited college or vocational training until she turned 25. It could not be withdrawn for rent, Jason's expenses, a wedding, or a business. "You said I could have the car after graduation," she snapped. "I said we would discuss transferring it if you were working or studying and maintaining insurance. You rejected support. I accept your decision. You expect me to walk out naked? The clothes on your body are yours, so are the clothes in those bags. Don't confuse a dramatic sentence with a legal fact." Daniel set the beans aside and looked at her. "Emily, you don't have to do this. You can stay if you follow the house rules. You can leave and still speak to us. But you cannot declare us dead and keep using Claire's accounts as if nothing changed." Emily turned on him. "She finally trained you." Daniel went still. I stood. "Do not insult him on your way out or what? You'll call the police on your own daughter?" If you steal a vehicle, yes. Jason sounded the horn again. Emily threw the car key onto the floor, removed the company laptop from her suitcase and dropped it beside the key, then pulled the phone from her pocket. Here, take everything. Remove your account and passcode first, we'll give you the number transfer authorization so you can open your own plan. That practical answer enraged her more than shouting would have. She wanted a battle large enough to prove she mattered. I gave her paperwork. After transferring the number, she signed a receipt for the returned property. Our attorney hadn't asked me to make her sign a declaration ending the parent-child relationship because no paper could erase biology. I didn't need theater. I needed clean records at the door. Emily looked back. When you get old, don't come looking for me. Daniel's eyes filled, but his voice remained steady. We won't. Emily flinched. I walked to the door and opened it. Be careful. If you ever need emergency medical help, call. If you want treatment, education, or a safe plan to leave an abusive situation, the Education Fund and our attorney can help you within the written terms, but we will not finance Jason's lies, threats, or chaos. I don't need anything from you. Then this should be easy. She carried her bags to Jason's car. He lowered the window and gave me a victorious smile. I smiled back. He thought he had stolen an heiress. He had collected a woman with no job, no car, no degree, no savings beyond a few $100s, and no access to my company. The sedan sped away. Daniel closed the door and stood with his forehead against it. I gave him time. Finally, he turned around. Is it wrong that part of me feels relieved? No. I love her. I know I don't like who she becomes around him. You are allowed to know both things. We ate dinner at the kitchen table. Daniel cried halfway through the meal. I held his hand. Neither of us called Emily. 3 days later, the management team signed the agreement to acquire Lakeview Packaging. The sale was not fake, and I didn't hide assets to defeat a legitimate claim. Emily had no ownership claim. The company was mine, built before she could read, and the leadership team paid fair market value with outside financing. I kept a consulting contract for 2 years and a minority note secured by company assets. The rest of the proceeds went into a carefully structured family trust. Daniel and I remain lifetime beneficiaries. Lucas's education and future support were protected. A charitable fund would receive a portion after our deaths. The trust documents explicitly excluded Emily except for access to approved treatment and education under the existing safety provision. An adult child in Ohio had no automatic right to inherit from a living parent in California. Where we planned to settle, we could expressly disinherit her as well. Our attorneys documented our intention in plain language. There would be no surprise loophole for Jason to exploit. In my first life, I had built an estate that became a target. In this one, I built a wall with a door only accountability could open. Chapter 9. We sold the Cleveland house within a month. The buyer was a nurse with 2 children who loved the large maple tree. In the backyard, I accepted slightly less than the highest offer because her financing was clean and her closing date was fast. I left no forwarding address with neighbors. That was not illegal or mysterious. Adults move every day without obtaining permission from children who have told them never to make contact again. We changed our phone numbers after transferring the old business lines to the new owners. Our attorney retained a permanent contact address for legitimate legal or medical emergencies. The education trustee had Emily's email and could communicate without revealing where we lived. Then Daniel and I boarded a flight to San Diego. Lucas was waiting in the arrivals hall with my mother, wearing yellow overalls with his dark hair standing up at the crown. The moment he saw Daniel, he ran so hard that one shoe came off. Daddy. Daniel dropped his bag and caught him. I watched my husband bury his face in our son's hair. He had spent so many years bracing for the next demand that he seemed surprised whenever love moved toward him without a threat attached. Lucas reached for me next. Mama home. Mama's home. The new house was modest compared with the property we had sold. It stood on a quiet street 20 minutes from my mother's place, with a small yard and enough room for Daniel's workshop. The title belonged to the family trust, which kept our estate plan orderly and our address out of casual business searches. We didn't tell Lucas that he had been born to replace anyone. He had not. When he was old enough to ask about the photographs of Emily stored in a locked archival box, we would tell him the truth in language he could understand. He had an older sister who was estranged, and the estrangement was not his fault or his job to repair. For the moment, he cared more about showing us a crooked tower he had built from blocks. Tall, he announced. Very tall, I agreed. He knocked it down and laughed. Our life didn't become perfect because we changed states. Lucas woke during the night. Daniel's father needed more help after a second surgery. My consulting contract required travel. Daniel and I argued over dishes, schedules, preschool choices, and whether Lucas needed another stuffed rabbit. The difference was that our problems stayed the size they truly were. Nobody climbed onto a railing to win an argument. Nobody threatened disappearance because dinner was wrong. Nobody demanded that one parent betray the other as proof of love. We enrolled Lucas in preschool and told his teachers about the surrogacy in case family projects raised questions. We kept contact with Sarah through the arrangement everyone had chosen. On Lucas's birthday, Sarah sent a card with a picture of the ocean. When Lucas was older, he would decide what that relationship meant to him. We didn't build his life from secrets, we built one temporary barrier around a vulnerable beginning. Back in Ohio, Emily moved into Jason's mother's basement. I knew only what the trustee reported. She didn't enroll in college or vocational training. She requested that the education fund pay cash directly to her, and the trustee refused. She submitted a handwritten invoice for a digital marketing academy owned by Jason's cousin. The address belonged to a mailbox store. The trustee requested accreditation and enrollment documents. Emily never replied. She sent me one email through the attorney: "You always wanted me to fail. Hope your money keeps you warm when Dad finally realizes what you are." I read it once, then placed it in the legal file and went outside to help Lucas plant strawberries. He dug holes too deep. Daniel filled them halfway while pretending not to. Lucas pressed each plant into the soil with grave concentration. "Will they grow?" he asked. "If we give them what they need," I said. "Lots of candy?" Daniel laughed. "Sun, water, and room." Lucas considered this. "And no stepping." "Especially no stepping," I said. That evening, he carried a cup of water to the garden by himself, half spilled onto his shoes. He didn't scream or blame anyone. He went back for more. Daniel stood beside me at the window. "Do you ever wonder where she is?" he asked. "Yes. Do you want to call?" I thought of Emily's email, the false invoice, the education fund that remained available if she ever chose something real. "No." Daniel nodded. "We watched our son water the earth. Some things grow because you hold on. Others grow only after you stop pulling them out of the consequences they chose." Chapter 10. 4 years passed before Emily tried to find us. She was 22 and planning to marry Jason. The education trustee contacted our attorney after Emily submitted a request for $40,000. The application described the money as professional development and household establishment. The attached documents included a banquet hall estimate, a jewelry receipt, and a deposit agreement for a one-bedroom condominium. Not one item qualified as education. The trustee denied the request and reminded Emily that funds remained available for accredited study, apprenticeships, licensing programs, books, and reasonable living expenses while enrolled. Emily replied that marriage was a form of adult education. The trustee didn't laugh in writing. I admired his restraint. Jason called Lakeview Packaging and demanded to speak to the owner. He learned that I had sold the company years earlier. The receptionist, who had never met me, refused to disclose private contact information. Emily went to our old house. A pediatric nurse named Melissa opened the door. Her youngest child was coloring at the kitchen island beneath the window where Daniel once grew herbs. "I'm looking for Claire Bennett," Emily said. "She sold us the house 4 years ago." "Where did she move?" "I don't know. She must have left an address." The closing was handled by attorneys. Emily told her she was my daughter. Melissa later wrote to our attorney because she was worried she had turned away a family member during an emergency. There had been no emergency. Jason simply wanted a wedding bigger than they could afford. They visited former neighbors, searched online, and called old business contacts. They found my professional biography and the public announcement of the Lakeview sale. They found a photograph of me speaking at an industry conference. They did not find our home. Property owned through a properly administered trust was not invisible to government, courts, or creditors. It was merely harder for an angry stranger to locate through a casual search. That was enough. Emily emailed our attorney: "Tell my parents I'm getting married. Normal parents help with weddings. If they refuse, everybody will know what kind of people they are." Our attorney forwarded it to us without comment. Daniel read it twice. "Do you want to send something?" I asked. He looked toward the backyard where 7-year-old Lucas was teaching himself to jump rope. He kept catching the rope on his shoes, muttering and trying again. "A card," he said. "No money." I agreed. We sent the card through the attorney. Daniel wrote that marriage required honesty, patience, and the courage to seek help when a relationship became unsafe. I added one sentence: the education fund remains available under its original terms. Emily mailed the card back, torn into 8 pieces. Jason posted photographs of it online and claimed we had abandoned our only child after she survived a suicide attempt. He didn't mention the boy who had demanded that attempt and filmed it. The post attracted outrage for 3 days, then Detective Torres, now a lieutenant, contacted the platform with the preserved juvenile court order and asked that no sealed records be published. We didn't release those records. We didn't argue with strangers. We simply had our attorney send Jason a letter instructing him not to use our names or imply that we had withheld medical care. He deleted the post without any money from us. The large wedding disappeared. Emily and Jason married at the county courthouse with his parents and 2 friends present. They rented a basement apartment from Jason's mother and bought furniture with high-interest credit. Daniel found a wedding photograph through a mutual acquaintance. Jason wore an inexpensive gray suit, Emily wore a white dress that was beautiful despite everything. They smiled at each other as if they had defeated us. Daniel set the photograph face down. "I hope they're happy," he said. I believed him. I also knew happiness built on entitlement would eventually receive its invoice. It always did. Chapter 11. By 28, Emily had learned that being free from parents didn't mean being free from bills. She worked at a distribution warehouse outside Cleveland. The job was honest, steady, and hard. She loaded shipments during long shifts and came home with pain running through the leg she had shattered as a teenager. Jason changed jobs often. He left a salon because the owner was jealous. He left a restaurant because customers disrespected him. He sold cosmetics online until the supplier closed his account for chargebacks. Then he discovered sports betting and announced that statistics were his real talent. Emily's pay disappeared into rent, credit card interest, and Jason's losses. At first, he apologized, then he blamed her for not earning enough. When she questioned a transaction, he smashed a plate beside her head. When she froze a credit card, he slapped her. When she threatened to leave, he reminded her that her own parents had abandoned her. "Where would you go?" he asked. "Who wants you besides me?" The answer frightened her because she had spent 14 years making sure it was almost nobody. She did have options. The trust still covered counseling and approved training. Our attorney's address remained available. Domestic violence services didn't exclude women. Her employer offered confidential assistance. Emily used none of them. She wanted rescue on her terms: cash, no questions, no accountability, and no admission that Jason was dangerous. The warehouse offered her a supervisor training course that would have increased her pay and moved her away from the heaviest lifting. The education fund agreed to cover tuition. Jason told her the schedule would interfere with their marriage. She declined the course. Months later, a younger coworker received the promotion. Emily came home furious. Jason agreed that her manager had cheated her, then asked for money to recover a betting loss. When she refused, he hit her with a metal water bottle. The cut over her eyebrow needed 6 stitches at urgent care. Emily said she had slipped in the shower. She had become her father in my first life, explaining away harm because the truth seemed more humiliating than the bruise. But unlike Daniel, Emily had once watched the pattern begin and chosen it over everyone who tried to help her. That didn't mean she deserved violence. It meant no inheritance could cure what she refused to name. Emily began searching for us again. This time, she was more patient. She found old corporate filings and learned that my former operations director, Natalie Carter, had moved to a suburb near Columbus. Natalie and I had been friends since college. She knew our address because she visited California once a year. Emily appeared at her garden center near closing. She didn't demand money. She brought flowers and cried, "I don't want anything from them. I just need to apologize before it's too late. Dad must be nearly 60. Mom had health problems when I was young. I have nightmares that one of them will die before I can make things right." Natalie knew some of our history but not all of it. She remembered Emily as a laughing child who chased fireflies at company picnics. She wanted to believe people grew. She refused the first day. Emily returned the next week with a letter addressed to Daniel. She said Natalie could read it. The letter described regret, loneliness, and a desire to rebuild without asking for $1. Natalie called me. "I haven't given her anything, but Claire, she looks terrible. Did Jason come with her? He waited in the car. Then she is not ready to rebuild." Natalie was silent. "She says she only wants to see you. She said she didn't want our money when she was 18. At 22, she found us because she wanted wedding money. Ask her one question: ask whether she believes she has a right to inherit from us." She did. Emily's answer was careful: "I'm their daughter. Whatever happens later is family business. I don't want to discuss it with an outsider. Natalie understood, she refused again. Jason didn't. While Emily was inside the garden center, Jason went through Natalie's unlocked office and photographed a holiday card on the bulletin board. A return address was printed on the envelope beneath it. The security camera caught him. Natalie discovered the theft that night and called the police. She also called me. They have your address. I looked across the dinner table at Daniel. For years, we had known this day might come. Lucas was 12, he knew he had an older sister and understood the broad truth. She had made dangerous choices, refused help, and lived separately. He didn't know the details of the first life, nobody did. Let them come. Claire, are you sure? Yes. Before they arrived, we told Lucas what we knew. We sat at the dining table with Daniel on one side of him and me on the other. I explained that Emily had obtained our address without permission and might come to the house with Jason. I told him the cameras would be on, the doors would stay locked until we chose to open them. He would be with my mother during the initial conversation. Lucas twisted a bracelet around his wrist. Is she dangerous? She has not threatened physical harm, she has ignored boundaries and tried to obtain money through dishonest documents. Jason has entered an office without permission. We prepare for what we know, we don't invent more. Does she hate me? Daniel's face tightened. She doesn't know you. If she reacts badly to learning about you, that reaction belongs to her. Do I have to love her because she's my sister? The question went straight through me. No, you don't owe closeness to someone because of biology. You owe ordinary human decency until their conduct makes distance necessary. Trust has to be built. Can I meet her if she's nice? Not alone, not today. If she respects the rules and wants a healthy relationship over time, we can discuss it with the family therapist. Lucas nodded slowly, then looked at Daniel. Do you want her to be nice? Daniel didn't hide behind an easy answer. Very much. Are you going to be sad if she isn't? Very much. Lucas reached across the table and took his hand. I'll stay at Grandma's until you call. He didn't promise to heal him, we didn't ask him to. That conversation mattered later when he returned from basketball and saw the sister whose absence had shaped the edges of his childhood. Surprise frightened him. But it didn't erase what he knew. He had choices, adults had a plan, and Emily's emotions were not his responsibility. I was done moving away from a debt I did not owe. This time, Emily could look directly at the life she had assumed would wait for her. Chapter 12. They arrived on a Saturday. Our doorbell camera showed Emily standing on the porch with a cheap bouquet. Jason waited one step behind her, wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy sky. Daniel. And I had already spoken with our attorney and local police. We didn't request officers at the house because neither Emily nor Jason had made a direct threat. We did activate every exterior camera, lock the office, and tell our neighbors not to share information. Lucas was at a supervised basketball clinic nearby. My mother would keep him there until we called. Daniel opened the door. For a moment, nobody spoke. Emily had Daniel's height and my dark hair. The girl I remembered had disappeared beneath a tired woman's face. A pale scar crossed her eyebrow, her shoulders curved as if she expected a blow. Daniel's hand tightened on the door. Dad, Emily whispered. Daniel's eyes turned red. Emily stepped forward to hug him, but Daniel raised one hand. Wait. The word stopped Emily more effectively than force. Why are you here? Daniel asked. I came to see you and Mom. I came to apologize. Jason removed his sunglasses. We drove 30 hours. Are you going to make a stand outside? I came into the entryway. Emily's gaze found me. Mom. I had imagined this scene during my first life. In those fantasies, she returned alone, humbled and sincere. I forgave her before she finished speaking. Parents who have been rejected often rehearse reunions more carefully than the children who left and no longer rehearsed. You broke into Natalie's office to get our address, I said. Jason scoffed. The door was open. The police have the recording. His confidence flickered. Emily looked at him. You said the card was on the front desk. It doesn't matter, we're family. You are not my family, I said. Emily held out the flowers. Can we please talk? Daniel looked at me. I stepped aside. You may sit in the living room for 20 minutes. The cameras will remain on. You will not enter any other room. If either of you raises your voice, threatens anyone, or refuses to leave, we call the police. Jason laughed. You talk to your own daughter like she's a criminal. My daughter arrived with someone. Under investigation for entering a locked office and taking private information, the rules are generous. They came in. Emily looked around the house. It was comfortable but not extravagant. Pale walls, family photographs, Daniel's handmade shelves, Lucas's basketball shoes under a bench. Her eyes stopped on a framed picture of the three of us at the beach. Lucas sat on Daniel's shoulders, laughing into the wind. "Who's that?" she asked. Neither of us answered immediately. She moved closer to the photograph. "Dad?" The front door opened. My mother had returned early because Lucas's clinic ended after a coach became ill. Lucas rushed inside carrying a basketball under one arm. "Mom, Grandma says my free throws are getting worse because I keep looking at the rim instead of the back of it, but Coach Maya says." He stopped. His eyes moved from Emily to Jason and then to us. Daniel crossed the room. "Lucas, buddy, this is Emily." He held the ball against his chest. "My sister." Emily went white. Jason's mouth opened. Lucas knew enough not to approach. He stayed beside Daniel and offered a cautious hello. Emily stared at him. He had my eyes. Daniel's smile, and no idea that his existence had just shattered a plan 14 years in the making. "How old is he?" Emily asked. 12, I said. Her bouquet slipped from her hand. Chapter 13. 12. Emily repeated the number as if I had spoken in another language. Jason recovered first. "You had another child." "Yes." "You can't have another child," Emily said. "The doctor said you couldn't." Lucas's eyes moved toward me. He knew the story of his birth. But Emily's shock made it sound like an accusation. "I could not safely carry another pregnancy. You and Lucas were conceived through fertility treatment. We had one embryo remaining. A gestational carrier gave birth to him under a lawful agreement." Emily's face twisted. "You planned this while I was in a wheelchair. We began discussing it after you threw hot food at your father and called him stupid. The transfer happened later, after months of counseling and legal preparation. So he is my replacement." Lucas flinched. I stepped between them. "He is not a replacement, he is a person. Do not put your grievance on a 12-year-old. You hid him from me. You were a minor. Sharing private information with a boy who had encouraged you to jump from a building. We protected a medical process. After you turned 18, you left, returned our property, refused contact, and told us never to look for you. We honored your demand." Jason's gaze swept over the house. I recognized the calculation in it. He wasn't interested in how Lucas had been born. He was measuring what the child's existence meant. "Is he why the company disappeared?" Jason asked. "The company did not disappear. I sold it to its management team, and the money went into a trust." There it was. The apology Emily had carried across the country lasted less than 10 minutes before inheritance entered the room. Daniel heard it too. Whatever hope had brightened his face at the door went out. Emily sat heavily on the sofa. "Mom, I know I said things when I was 18. I was a kid. You can't hold one angry day against me forever." I hold the next 10 years against you as well. You tried to find us for wedding money, then again after the trustee refused fake tuition invoices. Now you entered Natalie's office to obtain our address. Jason did that. I didn't know. Jason snapped. "I did it for you." Emily ignored him. "I'm still your daughter." "Biologically, yes. Legally, you remain our adult child. Emotionally, we are estranged. Because of choices you continue to make, none of those facts gives you ownership of our living assets." Her eyes filled. "You have everything. I can barely pay rent. You were offered education and training. The fund is still available. You submitted fraudulent paperwork instead. That academy was real. It was registered to Jason's cousin 3 days before the invoice. It had no instructors, curriculum, or accreditation." Jason stood. "You investigated us. The trustee verified a request before releasing trust money. That is his job." Lucas edged closer to my mother. I wanted him out of the room, but I also wanted Emily and Jason to understand that he was not a rumor they could erase. Daniel knelt beside him. "Please go to Grandma's house for a while. We'll talk later." Lucas looked at Emily. "Did you really jump off a building because somebody told you to?" The directness of children can cut through a decade of excuses. Emily stared at the floor. "I was young. Being young explains mistakes, it doesn't clean them up." Jason laughed sharply. "Your precious little boy sounds trained." Lucas didn't answer. He hugged Daniel, took my mother's hand, and left through the side door. The moment it closed, Emily stood. "You told him about me?" "In age-appropriate terms, we do not teach secrets that could explode in his face later." You made me a monster. No, we told him you were estranged, unsafe to contact without supervision, and still eligible for help if you pursued treatment or education. That is more generous than the version you posted online. Emily's hands curled. What happens when you die? Daniel closed his eyes. I felt nothing but clarity. Our trust continues. Lucas is a beneficiary, several charities are beneficiaries. You are expressly excluded from inheritance, the trustee may still fund approved treatment or education during your lifetime. You left me nothing. I left you opportunities, you tried to convert them into cash. Jason stepped toward me. You think some lab baby deserves everything more than your real daughter? Daniel moved before I did, he placed himself between Jason and me. Lucas is our real son, you will not speak about him that way in this house. Jason rolled his eyes. Of course, Claire bought you a nicer child, so you threw away the damaged one. Emily said nothing, that silence mattered more than Jason's cruelty. She had come to apologize, yet she allowed her husband to call her brother an object and her father a purchased man, her eyes were still empty. The visit is over, I said. Chapter 14. Emily refused to move. You can't do this. I already did. I'm contesting the trust. You may hire an attorney. Jason grabbed the framed beach photograph from the shelf. Maybe a judge should see how you erased her. Daniel took it from his hand. Put your hands on one more thing and the police will remove you. I had never heard that tone from my husband, Jason hadn't either. He stepped back. Emily looked at Daniel. You're really choosing them over me? Them? Daniel asked. You mean my wife and my son? I'm your child, too. Then act like my child, speak to me with respect. Tell your husband to stop insulting your brother, ask for help without demanding ownership. Emily's mouth worked, but no words came. You stood over me for months, Daniel continued. I washed you, carried you, slept in hospital chairs, you threw food at me because I used cinnamon. You never apologized, not once. Today you came into my home and asked what you get when I die. That's not why I came. It became the reason very quickly. Daniel opened the front door. Leave. Jason seized Emily's arm. Come on, we're wasting our time. She let him pull her toward the porch. At the threshold, she turned back to me. If he hadn't been born, you'd forgive me. Lucas did not take your place, you abandoned it and expected us to preserve it like a museum. Her face crumpled for 1 second, I saw the girl who used to bring Daniel bandages and fall asleep against my shoulder. Then Jason dug his nails into her arm. Ask her about the company money, he hissed, the girl vanished. My attorney will contact yours. Have your attorney use the address already on file if either of you returns here, contacts Lucas, approaches his school, or publishes our location, we will seek a protective order. Jason spat onto the porch. In my first life, Emily had done the same thing when she left at 18, I had knelt to wipe it away while Daniel cried. This time, I looked at the camera above the door. Thank you. The recording needed a clear ending. His face changed. They drove away. The police arrived an hour later to take our report. Natalie's local department had already identified Jason in the office footage. The California officer copied our doorbell recording, photographed the spit on the porch only because it accompanied the confrontation, and explained the steps for a civil harassment order. We didn't exaggerate, we didn't claim a threat that hadn't been made. We documented the trespass-related theft, unauthorized visit, refusal to leave, hostile handling of property, and statements about Lucas. Facts were enough. Emily did hire an attorney. The attorney sent a demand letter accusing us of fraudulent transfer, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and interference with a future inheritance. Our lawyer's response was 4 pages long. The company had been sold at fair market value years earlier. Emily had never owned shares. The trust was funded with our property while we were alive and solvent. No adult child possessed a vested right to a parent's future estate. The education provision remained available. The demand should be withdrawn. Her attorney withdrew within a week. Jason found another one willing to file. This time we didn't settle to avoid embarrassment. We answered every allegation, attached Emily's returned property receipt, her email rejecting support, the false academy invoice, the wedding demand, the doorbell video, and the trust's independent valuation records. We also filed a narrow counterclaim for the costs caused by the theft of our address and requested an order protecting Lucas's location. The judge dismissed Emily's inheritance theory at the first substantive hearing. Your parents are alive, the judge told Emily. You cannot inherit from living people, and you cannot compel them to preserve assets for you. Jason whispered too loudly, "This is rigged." The judge looked over her glasses. "One more interruption and you will leave the courtroom." Emily's face burned. The remaining claims ended after document exchange showed there was no hidden ownership and no promise of inheritance. Emily agreed to a protective order barring her and Jason from contacting Lucas or visiting our home for 3 years. She also agreed to repay a portion of our legal fees in monthly installments. Outside the courthouse, Jason shoved her hard enough to make her stumble. Our attorney saw it. "Do you want me to ask whether she needs help?" she asked. I watched Emily straighten, glance around to see who had noticed, then follow Jason toward the parking lot. "Give her attorney the domestic violence resources and the trust's treatment provision." I said nothing else. Compassion could leave a door open, it didn't have to drag a person through it. Chapter 15. The lawsuit cost Emily more than legal fees. Jason had believed a judge would hand them part of my money simply because he described the situation as unfair. When the court dismissed their claims, he needed someone to blame. Emily was close enough to hit. The first assault after they returned to Ohio happened in the airport parking garage. A security camera captured Jason throwing her suitcase down a concrete ramp and striking her twice in the face. Emily told the responding officer that they were arguing and she didn't want charges. The officer separated them, gave Emily a resource card, and arranged a ride to a hotel. Emily called Jason before the ride arrived, and he picked her up. The pattern tightened. Jason controlled their joint account because Emily was bad with money. He kept her identification in a lockbox because she was careless. He checked her phone, read her work messages, and accused her of affairs whenever a man appeared in a group chat. He drove her to work and waited outside at the end of her shift. If she was late, he questioned her coworkers. His violence wasn't constant. Constant violence would have been easier to name. Between attacks, he cooked her favorite meals, cried, promised therapy, and blamed stress. He reminded her that he had stayed after her parents replaced her. He said they were the only two people in the world who truly understood each other. Emily mistook shared damage for loyalty. Once she used a warehouse phone to contact the trust administrator. "I need the money Mom set aside." The administrator explained the terms. The trust could pay a licensed treatment provider directly. It could cover counseling, a documented rehabilitation program, tuition, or short-term safe housing connected to an approved domestic violence service. It could not give her unrestricted cash. "I don't need therapy, I need an apartment deposit. If you are leaving an unsafe home, we can connect you with an advocate and pay qualifying costs through the program. I don't want strangers in my business." "Then I cannot release funds." "My mother told you to say that." "Your mother's instructions were executed when the trust was created. I administer the written terms independently." Emily hung up. The administrator documented the call and sent a confidential summary to our attorney. I didn't contact Emily. The offer was clear. A call from me would have transformed a safe exit into another emotional contest. She tried to leave Jason twice. The first time, she packed while he was at a casino and took a bus to Columbus. She stayed with a former coworker named Marcus. Emily used a shared credit card to buy food. Jason saw the charge, guessed where she had gone, and arrived outside Marcus's apartment before dawn. He cried on the sidewalk, said he had swallowed a bottle of pills, and would end his life if Emily didn't come down. He screamed that Marcus was keeping his wife prisoner. Neighbors called the police. Emily went downstairs to calm him and left with him before officers arrived. Jason hadn't taken any pills. The second time, Emily did contact a domestic violence hotline. An advocate helped her make a safety plan and arranged a confidential room. She stayed away for 11 days and attended 2 counseling sessions. The trust paid the provider directly, exactly as promised. On the 12th day, Jason sent her a photograph of the scar on his wrist and a message saying that the injury was her fault. Emily returned. The advocate warned her that going back could increase the danger, but she didn't shame her. She told her the door would remain open. Marcus tried once more. He waited until Emily was alone in the break room and placed a spare house key on the table. "No speeches. You can use the couch if he comes over. I call the police. If you go back, I won't fight you, but I won't lie for you either." Emily stared at the key. "You think I'm weak?" "I think somebody has trained you to confuse being hurt with being weak. You don't know him. I know you wore long sleeves during a heat wave." Emily pushed the key back. "My parents put you up to this." Marcus swore and walked away that night. Emily found the key inside her lunch bag the next day. She kept it for 3 months. Police later found it in her wallet. There had been more than one door. She hadn't walked through any of them. Jason made her record a video saying that her family had paid strangers to kidnap and brainwash her. He never posted it, but he kept the file as proof that he could. Months later, Emily wrote an email to Daniel. "Dad, did you ever feel like there was no right answer, like anything you said made things worse?" Daniel read it at breakfast. His hands began to shake. "She knows," he said. I understood what he meant. Emily had finally reached the place where Daniel had lived during our daughter's recovery. Every kindness converted into duty, every boundary treated as betrayal. Every mistake used as proof that she deserved contempt. Daniel replied through the attorney, "Yes, that is why I want you to use the safe housing provision. You do not deserve to be hit. Leaving may take more than one attempt. Ask the advocate to help you again. I will cooperate with professionals, but I will not send cash or communicate through Jason." Emily didn't respond. Jason did. He emailed Daniel from Emily's account. "Keep your fake concern, you chose your new son. Live with him." Daniel printed the message and placed it beside the wedding card Emily had returned in pieces. "Was I a bad father?" he asked. "No, I gave up on her. You offered her a safe exit yesterday. You have offered treatment for 10 years. Refusing to fund Jason is not giving up." He stared at the two documents. "If she dies." There it was, the chain that had held us in my first life. If she dies, every boundary becomes murder. I took Daniel's face in my hands. "If Emily is in immediate danger, we call the police. If she asks for the services available, they will be paid. If she comes here, we protect Lucas and connect her with professionals. We cannot live inside her marriage and move her body for her." Daniel closed his eyes. "I know. Knowing didn't make it painless, it made it possible to survive." Chapter 16. Emily died during a winter storm. Jason had spent most of their rent money on an online betting account when Emily discovered the transaction. She changed the account password and moved her paycheck into a separate bank. It was the strongest boundary she had set in years. Jason came home drunk and demanded access. A neighbor heard shouting through the wall. The argument moved from the kitchen into the living room. Furniture struck the floor, glass broke. The evidence later reconstructed what happened next. Jason hit Emily with a cast iron candle holder. She fell against the corner of the coffee table and suffered a severe head injury. She was still conscious. Of blood marked the carpet where she tried to crawl toward her phone. Jason kicked her repeatedly, then took her phone and waited. He didn't call for help while she asked. He didn't call when she stopped speaking. He searched online for symptoms of a fatal head injury, how long bruises lasted, and whether a body could be moved after death. He wiped the candle holder, changed his shirt, and dragged Emily several feet to make the room look different. Only after her breathing became irregular did he call emergency services. He told the operator that his wife had attacked him, fallen during the struggle, and stopped breathing. He said he had been hiding in the bathroom for an hour. The apartment told another story. There was no blood in the place where he claimed she fell. His clothing was wet in the washing machine. The search history remained synchronized to a tablet he had forgotten to erase. The neighbor's hallway camera showed him leaving the apartment twice to smoke while Emily lay injured inside. Most damning of all, Emily's fitness watch recorded movement and heart rate data. It showed that she had remained alive for a long period after the initial blow. Emergency surgery couldn't save her. She was pronounced dead at 28. Detective Maria Torres called me. Even though the death occurred outside her jurisdiction, the Ohio investigators had found her name in the old juvenile file and asked for background. "I'm sorry," she said. I stood in my California kitchen with one hand on the counter. Lucas was upstairs studying for an exam. Daniel was in the garage sanding a chair. The ordinary sounds of my living family continued around the news of my dead daughter. "Did she suffer?" I asked. Maria paused. "Yes." I appreciated the honesty. "Did she have a chance if he had called immediately?" "The surgeon believes so. There are no guarantees, but the delay mattered. In my first life, Emily had delayed our diagnosis for months while poison accumulated in our bodies. In this life, Jason had watched her weaken and waited. The symmetry didn't satisfy me, it simply closed. Daniel came inside when he heard the phone fall onto the counter. I told him. He made a sound I had heard only once before, in the courtyard beneath the balcony. I held him while his knees gave way. For 3 days, he moved through the house like a man underwater. He reread Emily's last email. He asked whether another reply would have changed anything. He asked whether we should have flown to Ohio, found the apartment, and dragged Emily out. I answered every question the same way. We offered a path. Jason blocked it, and Emily returned to him. We didn't cause this. At night when Daniel slept, I sat alone and let both lives exist inside me. I remembered the toddler who carried bandages, the teenager who jumped, the adult who tore up our wedding card, the woman who asked her father whether there was ever a right answer. I didn't pretend I felt nothing. Indifference would have been another lie. I grieved the child she had been, I grieved the choices she might have made. I didn't turn that grief into innocence she had never earned. Jason was arrested at the hospital. Prosecutors charged him with murder, domestic assault, evidence tampering, and unlawful control of Emily's financial identification. The early reports called it a tragic domestic dispute, then the search records, watch data, banking history, prior police calls, photographs, and witness statements became public through the criminal case. The story changed. Emily had been abused, she had also rejected repeated avenues of help. Both facts were true. Her death didn't erase what she had done to us. What she had done to us didn't make her death deserved. That distinction was the final boundary I learned to keep. The medical examiner released Emily's body to the county after Jason's rights as surviving spouse were suspended during the investigation. As her parents, Daniel and I were asked whether we wanted to arrange burial. Daniel looked at me. What do you want? In my first life, after Emily died in prison, I had paid for an elaborate funeral no one attended. I had stood beside the grave and apologized to her for failing as a mother even though she had tried to kill me. This time I said, a simple cremation, no performance. Daniel agreed. We paid the licensed funeral home directly. The ashes were placed in a plain urn and stored until the criminal case ended. We didn't travel to Ohio, we didn't invite cameras, relatives, or strangers to turn our grief into a referendum on our boundaries. Lucas placed a white stone beneath the lemon tree in our yard, for the sister I didn't know, he said. Daniel cried. I stood beside them and didn't look away. Chapter 17. Jason pleaded not guilty. His defense claimed Emily had attacked him and that he had acted in fear. The physical evidence destroyed that story piece by piece. A forensic pathologist explained the direction of the blows, a digital analyst displayed his searches, the neighbor testified that Jason had left the apartment calmly to smoke while Emily was still making sounds inside. A bank investigator documented years of gambling losses and transfers from Emily's wages. The domestic violence advocate testified only about program records the court deemed admissible, including the safe placement Emily had abandoned after Jason contacted her. Marcus, the former co-worker, described the night Jason appeared beneath his apartment and threatened to harm himself if Emily didn't return. The prosecutor didn't need our testimony to prove murder. That was important to me. Emily's death belonged to the evidence of her final night, not to a story in which my money or motherhood became the main character. We watched the broadcast from our attorney's office when the verdict was announced. Guilty of murder, guilty of evidence tampering, guilty of felony domestic assault, guilty of financial identity offenses. Jason's face didn't change until the clerk read the last count, then he looked toward the nearly empty row behind him, searching for someone who might still rescue him. Nobody moved. At sentencing, the judge described the waiting as the cruelest part of the crime. You had repeated opportunities to summon aid. Instead, you searched for ways to protect yourself while the person you claimed to love was dying on the floor. Jason received a life sentence with parole eligibility only after decades, plus consecutive terms for evidence tampering and financial offenses. The sentence didn't bring Emily back, it didn't return Daniel's sleep or erase the white stone beneath the tree. It did something simpler, it named what happened. Naming it didn't repair Daniel. He began waking from dreams in which Emily was 14 again and calling from the courtyard. Some mornings he walked into Lucas's room just to confirm that he was asleep. Lucas noticed and started leaving his door open, an accommodation that looked kind but slowly made him responsible for his father's fear. Our therapist stopped us. Lucas can care that his father is grieving, he cannot become the treatment for his grief. Daniel apologized to him that evening. You don't have to keep your door open for me. If I am frightened, I will wake Mom or use the plan I made with my counselor. Lucas hugged him. You can still check if there's a fire. Agreed, fire only. Daniel joined a bereavement group for parents who had lost adult children under complicated circumstances. Some had lost children to addiction, violence, or estrangement. Nobody required him to describe Emily as innocent before he was allowed to mourn. I attended my own sessions. I spoke about anger, relief, guilt, and the shame of feeling all three together. The counselor didn't polish my emotions into something prettier. Grief is not a character reference. You can mourn a person without rewriting what they did. That sentence allowed me to breathe. After sentencing, Jason wrote to me from prison. The first letter blamed Emily, the second blamed his parents, the third blamed me. If you had given her her inheritance, none of this would have happened. I handed the letters to our attorney without answering. There had been no inheritance, there had only been our living property and Jason's belief that other people should die on schedules so he could receive it. Months later, a prison case manager called Daniel. Jason wanted him to add money to his commissary account. He said Emily would have wanted her father to show compassion. Daniel listened until the request ended. My daughter wanted many things that harmed her. I no longer confuse wanting with deserving. Please do not contact us again. He hung up. I had never been prouder of him. Emily's ashes remained unclaimed at the funeral home because Daniel and I couldn't agree on a place eventually. We chose the shore of Lake Erie, where Emily had collected smooth stones as a little girl. We obtained the required permission and went without an announcement. Daniel scattered half the ashes, I scattered the rest. The wind carried them over gray water. I loved you, Daniel said. I still do, but I could not live your life for you. I said nothing aloud. Inside, I spoke to both versions of my daughter. I saved you once and lost myself. I refused to surrender the second time and still could not save you. Now I release the belief that your choices were proof of my worth. We stood until the urn was empty, then we returned to California. The trust recovered some legal fees from the bond Emily and Jason had posted in the civil case. Their creditors fought over the rest of the estate. Under Ohio slayer law, Jason couldn't inherit from the wife he had murdered. There was little to inherit anyway: an old car, a damaged bank account, warehouse benefits, and debt. The education fund Emily had never used returned to the family trust under its terms. I didn't add it to Lucas's spending money. Daniel and I used it to create 2 restricted grants. One supported adolescent crisis counseling that included family boundary education. The other supported emergency services for women leaving violent partners, including transportation, confidential lodging, and legal consultations. We named neither grant after Emily. This wasn't a monument. It was the useful thing left after waste. The first annual report arrived the following spring. The adolescent program had served 63 families. Most weren't dramatic cases, they were ordinary parents and children trapped in escalating arguments, threats, secrecy, and fear. Counselors helped them create safety plans without teaching parents to surrender every boundary. Several teenagers entered longer treatment before a crisis became a headline. The second grant paid for hotel rooms, transportation, legal consultations, and emergency phones for women leaving violent partners. 18 people used it in the first year. 11 remained connected to counseling after 3 months. Daniel read every page. Would Emily have used this if it existed sooner? Something like it did exist. I know. He closed the report. I still wish she had. So do I. We signed the renewal together. There was no press release about our family. The organizations could describe the grants, but our story remained private. I had no interest in becoming a heroic mother who turned tragedy into purpose. Heroism was another performance. And I had spent enough years living for appearances. We had money that could remove practical barriers for someone ready to use a door. We used it. That was enough. Chapter 18. 7 years later. Lucas came home from college carrying a backpack, a laundry bag, and 2 bottles of sparkling lemonade. Dad, Mom, I brought tribute. Daniel looked up from the kitchen. His hair had gone silver at the temples, and he wore an apron Lucas had given him as a joke. It said he measured garlic with his heart. Tribute goes in the refrigerator, laundry goes in the machine. Lucas dropped the laundry bag beside the stairs. I just crossed a state line. Be kind to a weary traveler. The laundry room is 15 steps away. This family has no mercy. He carried the bag down the hall himself. I sat in the living room reviewing a manuscript for the small business program I now taught twice a year after selling Lakeview. I had spent several years consulting. Eventually, I grew tired of airports and started advising employee-owned companies from home. Lucas returned and handed me one of the lemonade bottles, cold, the way I like it. Thank you. He dropped onto the sofa, stretched his legs across the rug, and told me about a chemistry exam, a roommate who never replaced toilet paper, and a professor who spoke so softly that the front row leaned forward as one body. He was 19, the same age Emily had been when she stopped speaking to us. The comparison came less often now, but it still arrived. Lucas wasn't perfect. He procrastinated. He had once backed our car into the mailbox and spent 10 minutes considering whether the damage could be blamed on wind. At 16, he lied about a party and lost driving privileges for a month. He shouted that we didn't trust him, slammed his bedroom door, and apologized the next morning without being bribed. We didn't reward the apology with a car. We thanked him, repaired the damage together, and kept the consequence. He learned that love survived limits, so did we. At dinner, Daniel served pot roast, potatoes, and carrots. Lucas stole a piece of meat from the platter before he sat down. I saw that. Prove it. My own son, corrupted by higher education. He stole the next piece and put it on my plate, Lucas gasped. Favoritism. I will be contacting an attorney. Make sure the invoice is accredited, I said. Daniel laughed so hard he had to sit down. Lucas didn't understand the full history behind the joke. He knew that Emily and Jason had once tried to obtain trust money through a fake school, but he didn't know every line of every document. He didn't need to carry our archive of pain. After dinner, he told us he had been accepted into a summer research program in Boston. Daniel's smile slipped for half a second. That's far. I know housing is included, and I applied for the travel grant. I wanted to tell you after I had the details. I looked at the folder he placed on the table: budget, program contacts, housing rules, emergency numbers. He had prepared because independence was work, not a threat. Do you want to go? Very much. Then go. Daniel took a slow breath and nodded. Send us the flight options before you book, not because we control the trip. I have points. Lucas grinned. Deal. He didn't say he would never need us again. We didn't ask him to stay so we wouldn't be lonely. That was the family I had wanted without knowing how to build it. Later, Lucas helped Daniel with the dishes while I took the lemonade into the backyard. The lemon tree had grown tall. The white stone he placed for Emily remained beneath it, weathered smooth. I sat on the bench nearby. In my first life, I had spent my final years staring at a birthday photograph of Emily at 14. I kept asking where the child in the picture had gone. I hadn't understood that memory could become an altar, and parents could sacrifice every living thing to it. I no longer kept that photograph on display. It was preserved in the archive with hospital records, court papers, returned letters, and the final cremation receipt. I didn't burn it, I didn't worship it. It was evidence of a life that had existed and ended. Daniel came outside and sat beside me. He'll be gone most of the summer. Yes. The house will be quiet. Also, yes. He took my hand. We did all right with him. We are not finished. I know. From the kitchen, Lucas shouted, I can hear you discussing me like a completed renovation project. Daniel called back, go finish the dishes. Oppression. Use more soap. I laughed. The sound surprised me with how easy it was. Daniel rested his head against mine for a while. We listened to Lucas singing badly over the running water. Do you regret not going after her? He asked. He didn't need to say Emily's name. I looked at the white stone. I regret that she died. I regret that she chose Jason again and again. I regret the ways we spoiled her before we understood what we were doing, but I do not regret protecting you. I do not regret protecting Lucas. I do not regret refusing to buy peace with our lives. Daniel squeezed my hand. In the distance, evening light settled over the hills. Our windows glowed behind us. The house wasn't a fortress or a prize, it was simply home. My first life had taught me that blood could become poison when entitlement was fed without limit. My second taught me something stronger. Love was not proven by how much harm I could absorb. Love was the meal kept warm without becoming a debt. It was the honest answer. The locked door, the available treatment, the consequence that remained after tears. It was giving a child room to stand and refusing to become the floor beneath every deliberate fall. Lucas appeared at the back door with a dish towel over one shoulder. Dessert? What did you bring? Daniel asked. Nothing. I assumed my loving parents would provide it. I raised an eyebrow. He sighed. Fine, I bought ice cream with my own money. I will share if Dad admits I won the pot roast dispute. There was no dispute. You stole food. History is written by the people who buy dessert. Daniel stood and chased him into the kitchen. Lucas shrieked with laughter. I followed them beneath the warm light. Nobody begged anyone to stay, nobody threatened to leave, nobody had to bleed to prove they were loved. The old debt was finished, this life was ours. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you like this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.